Okay, the channel is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I'm Christiana Ellis,
And I'm Mike Mateen.
and we are here to wrap up our 2023 Oscar marathon. Obviously, the awards ceremony was a couple weeks ago now, but we're here to briefly discuss the winners, but also just to catch up on those last few straggler Oscar movies that we've watched since our last update. So, uh, I think it makes sense to just do a quick rundown of the winners and just stick to highlights, and then we'll jump into some discussions of All Quiet on the Western Front and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All
I mean,
right.
I think we once we could go through all the winners, we could do just kind of a quick thoughts,
Yeah,
feelings on how it all turned out before we
absolutely.
or we could do that first before going through all of them. I don't know, whatever
Well,
you want.
I think that it makes sense to just kind of do that alongside everything. I mean, if
Okay.
we start at the top of our list, then that's, like that's the big ones already, right? So those are the ones that the award ceremony saves for last. But I suppose we could go and start at the bottom of the list and go back up. But at the same time, there's no spoilers at this point. Everybody knows who won already,
Yeah.
unless there's someone out there who is absolutely waiting for our wrap up and they have steadfastly avoided any Oscar spoilers so that they could hear it live from us. And I think that uh, we'd probably be on the same page saying, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. Don't do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because who knows when we get to this.
Yeah. In any case, though, so let's. I think the big feel over of the night, is everything everywhere all at once. Won Best Picture, won a lot of the high level awards, and a lot of good feelings coming from that. I think, or at least certainly for me, and I think based on our discussion, I would imagine you feel the same. Did you have any broader thoughts on that, or?
No. I think you know, I was explaining to some people I was kind of watching it there. I was watching the ceremony with, they hadn't seen it, and I said, you know, I I think it deserved, based on everything that was in this, of the ones I'd seen, and I'd seen 80% of them, 70% of them.
Mm-hmm.
It This is the movie I was rooting for to win. I think should have won. I think for what I think it kind of does all the right things, right? It's a well put together, like kind of high concept movie that the Academy can like, but it's also fun and sci-fi and like
Mm-hmm.
entertaining, which I know is like kind of the concern, is like I think you were concerned maybe it was too much of
Well,
that the
I
Academy
mean,
wouldn't reward
my
it. Yeah,
concern was always that it was too weird.
too weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, it's like my mom still hasn't seen it, although she's interested. But she was telling me that, like, one of her friends tried putting it on and turned it off after 20 minutes, just saying, I couldn't. And I'm just feeling like, I feel like I would have expected there would be a lot more people who felt that way. Not because I don't think the movie is great, because I do. I'm just used to that movie being more niche approval in that sort of condition.
Yeah, I think I think it was the right year for it
Mm-hmm.
too. These other movies, nothing was dramatically like more best picturey, right? Like, of like the some of the stuff that sometimes has the overly, sucrose plot that,
Mm.
we don't like, but like really does well with the Academy. Like that movie isn't really in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're competing with a lot of other, and some of these other movies are weird too. Like Banshees of Inisherin is not weird,
Yeah.
you know.
Although I sent you a link for a meme. I don't
Yes.
know if you. So I've been delighted that the internet has discovered a meme format where they take classic cinema pairings and have them do the exchange of in another life I would have loved to just doing laundry and taxes with you. But having Roy Batty say that to Deckard in Blade Runner or something like that. But I found one that was the two guys from Banshees of Inisherin, and it was like, I just don't want to do laundry and taxes with you anymore, mate.
Which I didn't respond, but that is the best one I've seen of that because
Mm-hmm.
of the like I prefer the ones where they have a turn of the phrase as
Yeah.
opposed to just like putting it into a movie. Like it was funny at the beginning when it was just like in classic movies,
Mm-hmm.
and then that kind of just was like, okay, this is now
Well,
you're just
there's
picking movies and putting it in it,
yeah,
right?
there's a lot of them where like they're just taking a straightforward romantic scene from a movie and putting that line on it, which like works and is interesting, but like it's not really funny. It's although I did see one person in like I'm about to break one of my own recent lessons for myself, which is so one person was trying to claim that they hated that meme because it suggests that laundry and taxes are romantic and that's stupid. And it's like, what? No, that's way to completely misinterpret the whole point of the line. But
Yeah.
okay.
The whole point is it's romantic because it's not a romantic thing to do, and that's
Yeah.
the
The
fact that
point
you would
is
just
that
want to do benign things with somebody is the romantic part.
yes, it's that he will accept a banal life if it's spent with this person instead of an exciting life spent without them. That's the whole point. But I will also just back off of that and just to say that my recent lesson that I'm trying to take for myself is when you see a dumb take on Twitter or wherever, take a moment to think is like, does this person represent actual power or influence, or is this just a dummy with 200 followers on Twitter and you don't actually need to care what they say? Not to imply that people are automatically dumb if they have a small amount of followers. That's certainly not what I mean. The point is just that, like, not all takes merit responses or dunks for that matter. So,
Nope.
anyway, where were we? Do we want to just. Okay, so back to the actual Oscars, though.
Yes. I was happy that it won. It
Mhm.
wasn't I Banshee the point I was making. Banshees of Inisherin and Top Gun are my two favorite movies that I
Mhm.
have seen out of here, but I felt like this was the best overall put together movie and deserved to win best picture and
Mhm.
a number of the other things that it won. That's kind of my summation.
Nice.
But I also give everybody the caveat like you've got to understand it's weird
Yeah.
and it's okay if it's not for you. Like I've told people that too. Like I would give it a shot and I would okay let it start happen. Like it's gonna be weird and to the whole point. Like 20 minutes in, you're gonna be kind of on a ride. But
Mhm.
I would encourage you to give it a try. But if it's not for you and it's okay. Like it doesn't make it not a well made movie. It's just not well made for
Mhm.
everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It is
So
a very particular flavor of ice cream.
yes.
Um, but so I think one of the narratives that was developing for me when I was watching the Oscar ceremony, and some of the folks that were sort of commenting on it live, was just that early on it seemed like All Quiet on the Western Front was winning an awful lot of its nominated awards early on, and I think people were starting to wonder if that was a building narrative that like maybe it was going to win Best Picture, but and uh, and there was a lot of jokes about how the little snippet of the score that they played for that movie was the part of the score that represents the uncaring war machine, and so having it win so many awards and them keep playing that little snippet of the score just felt sort of weirdly ominous.
Yeah, that part I didn't catch, and I had wondered the same thing. And ultimately, where I feel like happened is that the reality is all the things that All Quiet on the Western Front won for
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty good
Yeah,
at.
yeah. I think that
Like
there were some that
ultimately,
I would have given to another movie in those categories, but it's not any question that it was bad on those points.
no. I mean,
Well,
like,
we'll talk more about it for sure.
yeah, let's
And
go through.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and scroll on through our list here. So we had Best Animated Feature, which went to Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which we're also going to talk more about in a moment. So let's skip it for now.
Sure.
But so Best Director went to the Daniels, or just Daniels, all AKA Daniel Kwan and Daniel Schneidert. Um, and that movie won a bunch of things. We're going to be saying it over and over again. So Best Actor went to Brendan Fraser, which was I think my biggest mixed feelings of the night, only because I like Brendan Fraser a lot. I think it makes me happy for him to get an award. And by all accounts, he has a great performance in that movie. And yet, everything I hear about the movie itself makes me think that sounds terrible. I don't want to watch it. And so,
Correct.
even if he's great in it, I'm like happy for him as a person that I like, that he gets to win an award for something he worked hard on. But the movie sounds bad to me. So, I don't know. Maybe I. So, I haven't seen it. I'm not, frankly, planning to see it.
Yeah, I was kind of torn too because, everything his career, his life, everything about like this, and just the redemptive like arc that this
Mm-hmm.
gives him, like, is awesome.
Yeah.
And I don't want to project that that had anything to do with why like he got these votes, like, because I don't think that that's fair. I think
Mm-hmm.
he turned in a performance that was probably worthy of this. Um,
I mean, I've been loving him as Robot Man on the Doom Patrol TV show, even though technically he's just the voice in that one, but he's great. Well, he's not actually, because sometimes he's playing his live action self as well. He's just not he's not under the mask. Kind of like
yeah,
with Mandalorian, it's not Pedro Pascal always on screen under the mask. It's he has stand-ins for that. But
yes. So this is another place, and one of the things that I was disappointed in, but I don't really know where. This is probably the category that most that I would have thought. Like, I was disappointed that Elvis did not win a single thing.
yeah, yeah.
I think costume design probably is the one that I think I wanted the most, just because when I learned the story of like how they would take the videos of like when he did TV performances, and they would like keep pausing them and then recreating like all of the people's costumes from the audience,
Yeah.
like just the meticulousness of that I love. Now I get, like, again, we
Mm-hmm.
get to that one, but Austin Butler I particularly loved in this for the exact reason that my parents were critical of this movie. Is they're like, I mean, just Elvis was so unique, like you could just tell like he just wasn't Elvis, right? And I was like, that's exactly why this was good, because he wasn't just mimicking Elvis. I'm
Well,
tired of
like the
movies like
bizarre
that.
thing that I kept hearing people say is we want to stop giving awards to people just for doing impressions. And I'm like, that's what you came away from his performance in this movie with?
Right, which my parents came away differently, and they said he didn't do in a good impression, that he
yeah.
was like his own unique character. But I said, but didn't he capture like the feeling of Elvis? And they're like, well, I guess yeah, he did. It's just we just when they cut to Elvis at the end, you were like, no, that's Elvis. And I was
Hmm.
like, that's the point. Like, they were trying to show it's telling a story in a different way than these things normally do. That's why I love this movie,
Yeah.
because it was more, it had Baz Luhrmann's a little bit of flair, right? Like, it's not trying to give you this exact documentary of Elvis's life with somebody mimicking Elvis, right? Like,
Hmm.
he gave you the energy of Elvis and the energy of what happened and the kind of broad strokes of how he got to where he was, and he made that accessible to people who didn't know any of that. Like, there's so many people that I've come across who are younger who are like, I didn't realize how sad Elvis's life was. And
Yeah.
that my parents were like, yeah, I mean, how did you not know that? Like, it's Elvis. And it's like, people don't know that, guys.
Well, I think that a
Like,
lot of people, and I'll even half include myself here, didn't really understand that all the stuff in Vegas to the end wasn't just because he got lazy and didn't want to travel anymore or that he was on drugs and couldn't manage to do more. He was really stuck there for
yeah. And he was on
contractual and
drugs
financial
and
reasons
lazy
and
because he
hated it.
was sad.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I didn't really know that about it. So, anyway.
No, and I think that that's this movie gave an accessibility to somebody like that. And because he was doing it with like and I think that's part of what bothered them, is that he had more of a flair that felt like a modern performer, even though he was like doing Elvis stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he had enough things that were like kind of the charismatic things of like a pop star, like a modern pop star.
Mm-hmm.
But that's exactly what made him accessible to everybody else. And so anyway, I thought Austin Butler did a great job. I thought there were things in the movie, particularly the costume design. I'm sad it didn't win anything,
Yeah.
but that's my my final take on Elvis as it relates to the ceremony. So
Yeah. So on to the next category for Best Actress. We actually, so the award went to Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I thought that was wonderful. I mean, I've loved her for a long time. I've been kind of rediscovering her in the last couple of years, actually revisiting some of her older movies. Like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Police Story 3, which is one of her Hong Kong movies. And just feeling in general like she's really cool, and this is just such an incredible performance from her, so I was happy she won. But on the other hand, the only other person that I was maybe kind of rooting for a little bit is Kate Blanchett for Tar, because uh, that movie is complicated, but her performance is incredible. And Tar was another movie where I think it maybe deserved something, but ended up getting completely shut out as well. And so I don't know that I think necessarily that Kate Blanchett should have won over Michelle Yeoh, but Kate Blanchett did a hell of a job in that movie.
that's one I haven't seen, and
Mm.
I've heard it's so good, but it's not
Yeah,
capturing
yeah.
me like to move up the list.
Well,
So
it's a little too complicated and messy to be able to pitch it easily. But it what it does well. But let's keep moving. So, best supporting actor, we got Ke Huy Quan for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and another wonderful one, and of course, like another incredible speech at the ceremony. He's just such a lovable, sweet guy, and makes me happy to see him happy. And it was him and Brendan Fraser winning made lots of people post a still from Encino Man where the two of them are together and saying both of these guys won Oscars tonight, which is funny. And it just actually made me think how I've not watched that movie probably since it was new, because I didn't even really remember that he was in it. But but yeah, so he was certainly who I was rooting for, even though, as we previously discussed, it was a very strong category this year.
yes, yeah. The only, I mean, I also think Barry Keoghan is going to get one at some point.
I think
You know,
so. I think
he's just
he's getting
delivering.
enough attention on a regular
Yeah,
basis that it's a matter of time. Although
yeah,
sometimes it seems like that's going to be true, and then it just never seems to quite materialize, like Sigourney Weaver.
it's true.
All
Yeah.
right. But so let's moving along. We've got Best Supporting Actress, which went to Jamie Lee Curtis for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I was kind of holding out, rooting for Stephanie Hsu from Everything Everywhere All at Once, just because I think Jamie Lee Curtis did a great job in that movie, but I think she's been great before. Whereas Stephanie Hsu is kind of just this newness of it, and her performance, especially, I think on rewatch, her performance especially shines just because when you don't really know where the plot is going, you're more focused on that. And you don't necessarily understand the nuance of all the stuff she's doing otherwise. But Jamie Lee Curtis is great, to be sure, and in some ways, I think people talked about that being kind of sort of a lifetime achievement award for her a little bit,
Yeah, I
body of
100%
work
agree.
prize.
Well, especially if if you've kind of settled on that you're looking at everything everywhere all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously your point makes sense, is that you kind of miss Stephanie Hsu's performance, but eh, there's kind of this, like you said, this body of work of like, you know what, she was good enough, she's good enough in this to win it. Like, let's go ahead and reward it all.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, moving on to the Screenplay Awards. Best Original Screenplay went to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which we've certainly talked about. Best Adapted Screenplay went to Women Talking, which kind of surprised me, but was actually what I was really kind of rooting for after I saw that movie, just because, like, there's a lot of things that are great about it, but the script, like, that's an example of a movie where the script is just really the most the biggest strength of the movie, because it takes something that subject matter wise could seem like it would be very difficult to make like a propulsive, interesting movie out of, but the script manages to do that, and I think it's an incredible script. I'm glad it won, honestly, even though there's lots of strong scripts this year. So
Yeah,
that's a movie that's another one that I think a lot of people probably wouldn't make a point of seeing, except for it winning awards. So I want to encourage people to see that one because I think it's great.
that's good because that's the only one on here I haven't seen, so I can't really comment. I mean, I liked the other
Well,
script.
there was
Or,
also
no, I'm sorry, I didn't
Living,
see
which
Living.
neither of us
Sorry.
saw.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. It
Yeah,
was kind of squeezed in there
yeah,
on the spreadsheet.
yep, yep. Best international feature film went to All Quiet on the Western Front, which we're going to talk more about. And I think once it won that, there was a little bit of the like, oh, okay, that's the one that it's going. Like it got other things, but seemed like it was maybe going to stop there.
Yeah, and then once we started rolling out the screenplays and
Mm-hmm.
once everything all at once started to start clipping away the bigger awards, it was like, okay,
Yeah.
yep,
Well, see, that was the thing is like when people were starting to feel anxious, I was like, but we haven't had the Oscar, the acting ones yet, and it's not nominated in those. And so that's where Everything Everywhere is going to get its momentum back. And sure enough, that's what happened. But so keep moving on for best original score went to All Quiet on the Western Front. It wasn't my pick, but it's a hell of a score on that. It's very distinctive. It's not always fun or enjoyable to listen to, but often that's kind of the point. As with that clip that we talked about, that boom, 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 that theme was really kind of, it's off-putting and kind of scary, but that's kind of the whole point. It's just meant to resemble this monstrous tank that's just going to roll over anything in its way.
yep.
Um, and then best original song went to Natu Natu from RRR with I thought all of the live performances of the songs were actually really well staged this year, but
Yes.
I mean, I'm on record in these episodes of absolutely adoring RRR. And if this is the only thing it's going to get nominated for, then by God, it should win. In my opinion, I'm glad that it did. I thought the live presentation of it, I just find it remarkable how daring it is to stage such a complicated, difficult dance sequence on a live show with so many people watching. Because it's not an easy dance. It's very aggressive and requires a lot of movement. Like dancing does in general, but it's just a very sort of fast moving, big motions dance.
Yeah.
And having so many people doing it live on stage was daring, I thought. And I thought it was pretty good, although obviously the version in the film where it has all of the story context and the other filmmaking tools, makes it shine all the more. But once again, I'm going to insist that everybody find a way to watch RRR, even if it's the Netflix version, which is perfectly acceptable to watch. It's great. People watch the first 20 minutes, you will love it.
Yeah, it's this one is high on the list. The
Mm-hmm.
the stickiness to this one is the time
Yeah.
commitment.
It is long. That's true. What I will say is that there is a brief intermission section in it, which is actually a great place. Who would have thunk? For if you're going to split it, that's the place to do it. So if you're feeling like you're enjoying it, but you can't quite make the whole runtime work in a single evening, wait for that intermission point, and it's a good place to break it up. But my guess is that if people sit down to watch it and you watch the first 20 minutes to half an hour, you're going to want to keep going.
So that's kind of the other thing I was thinking about this was because I think we talked in an earlier episode about how I watched Black Panther in 3 nights,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the only problem with that with RRR is that with Black Panther, my wife was also interested in watching it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have 3 nights where I just watch stuff on my own. Like it's just not how our life
Yeah.
is set up. But if it's truly that compelling, maybe it's the thing like, hey, give this a shot. And if after the first 20, 30 minutes, you don't want to watch this anymore, then we'll turn it off and I'll go finish it at some other point. But if you do, then we can watch an hour tonight, an hour tomorrow, an hour the next
Mm-hmm.
night or whatever. So maybe that'll be my tactic.
Mm-hmm. And so, while of
If you
course,
if you believe it's that compelling,
well,
then
so here's my thinking on this is that I liked Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. I would probably give it like a 7 or 8 out of 10. I like RRR 10 out of 10. Honestly, if it had gotten a Best Picture nomination, I would have had a tough time choosing between it and Everything Everywhere All at Once. But it didn't because it didn't get submitted by India for the Best Picture consideration or for Best International Feature Film, and that's how that works. So it just, it was actually a political thing, which we don't need to get into. But that movie's great. People should watch it. Um, the best version is the Telugu version if you can find it, but the Netflix Hindi version is also incredibly awesome and very much worth people's time.
Is it dubbed or subtitled?
It is dubbed. Well, so I mean, no, excuse me. It is both. It is dubbed into Hindi and then has subtitles. The Netflix version is. So the original Telugu language version is most of the characters speaking in Telugu, except for the characters who in the story are speaking English, where they speak English. But the Hindi version that's on Netflix has everybody dubbed into Hindi, including the people speaking English, and then with English subtitles. So there are scenes where you see the character on screen speaking English with their mouth movements, but it's still, you hear a Hindi voice and then the English subtitle.
Mm.
Now, they did get all of the original cast, though, to do the dubbing, so it's not different actors, it's just, a different audio track. So, the original version is best, but Hindi version, perfectly acceptable. All the things that are great about it are still great in that version. So, but let's keep moving along. So, best production design, All Quiet on the Western Front. Best cinematography, All Quiet on the Western Front.
This is the one where like the cinematography is one which we'll talk more about earlier, but this is the category that it absolutely stood far and above everybody else. But
yeah.
Anyway,
I had maybe a soft spot in my heart for Tar, which actually is an incredibly beautifully shot movie, but certainly All Quiet on the Western Front is as well. Best costume design went to Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. And I think without wanting to in any way diminish the achievement of the costumes in that movie, it did also feel a little bit like, okay, that's the award that we're going to give to that movie.
Right. Which I was hoping that would be the award they gave to Elvis, but I also understand.
Yeah, and like that's not to diminish Ruth Carter's work as the costumer in that movie, because the costumes are incredible. Because again, it's we talk about this sometimes, the idea of best costume design for movies that are just like historical period pieces where all they're doing is replicating existing clothing that really existed, versus the idea of creating outfits that have never existed, like all the different styles in Wakanda, for example. But it's two different kinds of costuming. But in any case, the costumes in that movie are really good.
Yes.
Best makeup and hairstyling went to The Whale, which I don't know. I mean, I have mixed feelings about, partly just because part of the reason that I have issues with that movie in general is like, maybe as a general rule, Hollywood can stop doing fat suit stuff, especially when like it could have just been a heavy actor, and it does, like, it's one thing if the movie has to show them in both states or something, but then I have to call hypocrisy a little bit on myself, because I just saw John Wick 4, which has a character who is in a fat suit, and it's pretty awesome. Not the fat suit specifically, but the character. Anyway, though, yeah, so best makeup and hairstyling went to that. I mean, it's certainly difficult, I would imagine, but I don't want to spend any more time on that. Best documentary went to. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was saying that's why I'm not going to even respond, because we don't need to spend any more time on it at all.
Yeah, let's just tick through the last couple here. So, best documentary feature went to Navalny. Felt in a lot of ways like it was probably kind of a political thing, but that's fine under the circumstances, I think. It's just...
this maybe isn't the best I realized when I saw what this movie was that I actually tried to watch this movie a couple of
Mm,
months ago, and it just, I don't know, it never grabbed me.
yeah.
So
But
and
like
again, maybe I
it
just wasn't in the
winning
right.
felt like the Ukraine support question, which
Yeah,
doesn't mean it's a bad movie, but that it felt like that was why. Best sound went to Top Gun Maverick, which sure, why not? Great sound
yeah,
there.
had a lot
But
of sound.
best visual effects went to Avatar: The Way of Water, which it was like there's some great effects in those other four movies, but it's frankly ludicrous the idea that it would go to anyone else this year.
Correct.
Yeah. And then the last but not least, best film editing goes to Everything Everywhere All at Once, and that was another really strong category this year. But so
Yeah, because in a normal year, you would think like everything everywhere all at once with just the way that it's put together with the multiverses and stuff, like hands down the winner. But like
mhm.
Top Gun is pretty slick on the editing,
Oh
right?
yeah, well, especially given the way that it was filmed with real actors and real planes, where a lot of times they're going to have to use the footage they can get in some cases, right?
Yep.
And so putting it together and making it feel all very intentional, even though you're stitching together what might have been, you know, 30 usable seconds out of an hour of filming or something like that, right?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So
Yeah. But so those are the winners. I thought that the ceremony went pretty well. Certainly compared to there were no slap level disasters like last
nope.
year. Um, Jimmy Kimmel, I think, did mostly fine, although there was one part where they literally cut short the speeches of the visual effects guys so that Jimmy Kimmel could do a weird bit about phony made up questions to ask for like Malala and stuff like that. That whole sequence was just a dud, and coming right after they had cut short the speeches of winners, it just felt like, why are we doing this? This
Yeah.
didn't need to happen.
No, and I think, yeah, I think he did mostly a good job. It was kept moving at a
Mm-hmm.
pretty good pace. It felt, it was good and lighthearted, and they didn't avoid the slap thing. But
Mm-hmm.
what I think probably, even though I've heard mixed things about it, just the fact that Chris Rock released a stand up a week before on Netflix,
Mm-hmm.
just where he just kind of goes into the whole incident and like kind of bashes Will Smith. Like, I think that made sense though, because like let it live there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like let that dispute live in the Chris Rock humor world now,
Yeah.
right? And if you want to engage in it, then that's where you go watch it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when we don't need to bring it all into here and make it the joke every other bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like don't make it once, make the joke once,
I
and then
thought
just
the
move
joke that
on.
he told
Yeah,
about it was kind of funny, just especially on the idea of like if anyone tries to get up on the stage, they're gonna have to get through. And he's like, Evelyn Wong and like all these like tough people. I don't even remember all of them, but and then finishing with Spider Man, but then instead of cutting to Tom Holland, it's Andrew Garfield, which is kind of funny.
yes,
I mean, not that Andrew Garfield was in Spider Man, but it was just not the one that maybe people expected. And and
yeah.
he
No,
and he does the
it
mug to
was
the
good.
camera and everything.
Exactly. Like they made a good joke out of
Hmm.
it and then
Yeah,
they moved on from it, right?
yeah.
So yeah.
So I thought
Anyway,
the ceremony was pretty good. I liked how they specifically commented on, yes, we're presenting all of them this time. We're not cutting some out. They did the live performances of all the best original songs. I like all of those things. So I thought they did pretty well. I think my favorite ceremony in several years. I think.
yeah, they seem to have figured out how to keep people moving along
Hmm.
without, like there's some times where people just take more time than they need. They're gonna get cut off,
Yeah.
but it seems to be less imposing. Like I don't know what they're doing differently, but there was a
Hmm.
lot less of the like, no, 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 I'm about to get cut off. I need to get this in. Like
Yeah.
that didn't happen, right?
Hmm.
Like the transition for, hey, I need to wrap it up and I'm gonna walk away without like making a
Hmm.
thing about how I need to do this. There
Yeah.
was a lot less of that.
There was
So
really only
whatever
the.
they're doing to make that work,
Mhm.
they did well.
Yeah,
So
I think there was really only the one like that I mentioned where it felt abrupt.
yes.
But yeah, so in any case, though, let's talk about these last couple of movies we're going to discuss. So All Quiet on the Western Front. I've touched on it a little bit, but now that you've seen it, what did you think?
I think that it is an incredibly well-made movie. I think it's absolutely beautiful to watch. Like it's that's why I said the cinematography on it. Like I think it's shot like a moving painting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't think originally that I was going to agree because I always enjoy a a different take on like war.
Mm.
And you kind of had made the quip of that, like, hey, we've seen enough movies that war is bad or whatever. I think was kind of the shorthand of what you said. I'm not trying to
Yeah,
quote
more. I
you.
said it in a couple of different ways, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm not going to go into it with that mindset because I think there are interesting ways to say that like war is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that this one did not do anything new for me. And I'm someone who generally enjoys like war movies and enjoys movies that remind us why war is bad
Mm-hmm.
and why maybe that sometimes like when you think of it as something glamorous that it's absolutely not glamorous, but like if you know you have those like kid fantasies of like going out and like fighting bad guys in a war, right? Like it's not that's not what it was ever like, and it never
Mm-hmm.
is going to be like, and that it's I. It's a weird way to say I enjoy being reminded of that because enjoy is not the right word, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
it is kind of the right word.
Yeah.
Um, however, this movie just did it didn't do anything new for me. It didn't grab me in a different way. Even
Mm-hmm.
as beautiful as it looked and as good as that these characters portrayed everything, it just it you were right. Like it feels like something I've already seen, just
Mm-hmm.
made prettier.
Yeah, like the shortest version that I've said a couple of times to different people is that it's like it's sure well made, but I just watched it feeling like I don't think we needed another one of these.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's like it's good. It doesn't do anything wrong. It just felt like now it has become another one of these to sit on the shelf next to all the others.
Yes.
I will say the part that kind of stood out to me is the segments that I've seen some people criticize because they're not from the book, I guess, but the scenes of the diplomats trying to negotiate the ceasefire, the surrender, right? And I kind of liked that because I thought that the movie really played with some interesting irony in that even this point of view character that we've got who is on the the quote unquote right side in the sense of believing that they should end the war, even at the cost of catastrophic surrender terms, right? That historically went on to cause some other problems, which is not to say that it should have gone differently. It's all complicated, right? But the point is, the person who's trying to end the war and cares about it and seems to be motivated for the right reasons, which is how many more thousands of lives are going to be wasted before we come to the same outcome. But at the same time, noting how, he has fine leather slippers that he wears every day and he's dressed in nice clothes and sitting on a luxurious train car. He's not down there in the ditches and the trenches of no man's land, right? He's very privileged in his own way, even as he's trying to do the right thing from that perspective. And I thought that was kind of interesting to have the movie comment on it in that way. But like that was, like not that the rest is bad. It's just like that was the part that I felt like I hadn't seen in some other movie already.
Right.
Yep. So, I mean, do we even real? So, like, I guess anyone who is not familiar, the basic plot is following the famous German novel of a young man and his friends early in World War I, who are motivated by love of the fatherland and lots of propaganda to believe that fighting in the war is going to be this big noble cause, only to discover that war is actually terrible. Um, Not to make it a competition, but there are some especially terrible aspects of World War I and the way that all played out, trench warfare and all of that stuff. And it is the process of him going through that war and gradually losing his innocence and then basically losing anything else that left him as a complete functioning person, all the way up until he just loses everything else. Because that's what war does to people. And so it is, a classic story, but it has also literally been made into movies several other times. And it has been the template for several other movies that were made that weren't literally adaptations. And so, like, I don't know. We keep kind of circling around the same point, which is that like it's hard to point to that it does anything wrong. It just doesn't necessarily do anything that makes it feel that different than several other movies that are kind of doing the same thing.
Right. And you know, I mean, I think it's one of the more seminal stories when you come to the book
Mm-hmm.
about like this, right? Like the because it tells the whole arc that we've seen between, but we've probably seen it plenty in Vietnam, or we've seen it in,
Mm-hmm.
the Gulf War, or like all these things. It's like the idea that you get all fired up and jacked up because of the propaganda, and like
Yep.
we're gonna go kick some bad guys ass, and then it's like you get there and it's like, holy crap, this sucks. And then it just keeps happening, right? Like it's not even
Mm-hmm.
just like this initial moment of this all
Yeah, it's
sucks.
like
It's just
learning
the
that lesson is not sufficient to get to go home then.
right. It's like, oh, we learned, now we go home. No, no, now you have to live in this
Mm-hmm.
till you are completely detached. And then that whole point of like being detached and like that, I mean, it's on, I mean, the same thematic
Yeah.
thing is in American Sniper, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
where by the end he can't function in society, and it's almost like, when at the end of this story when he dies, I mean, I think that's the whole thing. Like the whole All Quiet on the Western Front is
Right.
like now his mind is quiet. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
sort of a weird thing with that too, right? Like, but that that arc has been told so many times.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, so one of the things that, like, in the last couple of weeks, I actually found myself inspired to rewatch Apocalypse Now, which has kind of long been one of my favorite in the war movie genre. And there was a period of my life where I was actually semi obsessed with it, and I've kind of gotten over that to some extent. But I think it's a great movie still. But like certainly that movie too, all of these war movies are kind of talking about that. But like that one is doing a lot of like hallucinatory sort of imagery and is talking about the different ways in which different people react to that sort of pressure. Um, and I feel like there's other Vietnam movies, but none of them are quite like Apocalypse Now. Whereas All Quiet in the Western Front, while it is well executed, it feels just right down the middle. It's not like it's ambitious in scope and in spectacle, but not thematically or from any kind of a, you know what I mean? Like it's
Mhm.
just it's right down the middle. Which again, it's like it's good, and if there are people who this is their first exposure to this kind of story, I'm sure it'll be great. But it feels like another one of these.
Well, yeah, and that's what kind of my point was, is that it at the time that it was written, it wasn't just another one.
Right.
That's what I said. It's like seminal in this field. But now, when you go back and watch a remake of a book that was written 100 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
that we've told that theme so many different ways, even if it was one of the earliest ways to tell the theme, like
Mm-hmm.
it feels old, and that's you know. So yeah, I mean, we're in agreement. So
Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and move on then to talk about Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. This was the winner of the Best Animated Feature category. It was certainly the one that I was expecting to win. And it had been my favorite for a while up until Marcel the Shell with Shoes On kind of snuck by it in my subconscious somehow. Just because, like, I had seen them all. And I just found out that as the weeks went by, Marcel just kind of ended up being the one I kept thinking about more. But Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, I thought was great. But what about you? What did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was phenomenal. Like
Mm-hmm.
it, especially. I mean, it was great in the story that it told. Like
Mm-hmm.
independent of the craft that went into it. But then when you think about the craft that went into it to make like that ambitious of a stop motion movie, that
Mm-hmm.
it is, I mean, it's just impressive. So,
Well, like in the stop motion is even kind of it makes the medium thematic. You know, it just ties right into the whole storytelling there. But like, not that we would expect anything else from Guillermo del Toro at this point, but his take on Pinocchio is such a perfect illustration of the opposite of what we mean when we were just saying it all quiet on the Western Front, where it does everything right, but it's kind of just everything is exactly what you would expect it to be. Whereas this version of Pinocchio is taking all sorts of liberties with the story, not just telling a slight variation on it, but taking whole sections and completely transforming them, but maintaining the same general theme, but layering in other themes, and then adding stuff about like the land of the dead in there. All of this stuff that is just big swings that are not from the original story.
well, and moving it to, um, like into like World War II.
Well, yeah, it was yeah, certainly fascist Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like taking the whole Pleasure Island sequence, where like in the Disney version is this big amusement park where the kids can misbehave and smash things and drink and smoke cigars and stuff like that, and then all turn into donkeys and that whole sort of thing, which um, not that this movie does not experiment with the supernatural and magic, but instead it takes that sequence, which is the most magical element in some ways of the other versions of the story, and makes it like grounded and gritty in by making it a child soldier training camp for fascist Italy.
Yeah.
Um, and taking shoot. So Lampwick is the character from the Disney version. I keep comparing to the Disney version because I honestly haven't read the original book or anything. But his name is like there's still something Wick in there, I think. But this other,
Candlewick.
hmm?
Candlewick.
Oh, okay, yeah. So in any case, Candlewick in the this version of the story has his own sort of theme. He's not just like the other bad kid that becomes the object lesson for Pinocchio, right? He has his whole thing with his dad, and that ties into some of the theme and layering in to this version of the movie that Geppetto is not perfect either, right? Like he's doing his best, but he's dealing with some of his own trauma because he has like even making the creation of Pinocchio not be this beautiful, carefully crafted thing, but something that comes out of sort of a drunken, desperate night. Um, and I don't know. I loved all of those sort of darker elements they added to the story, and dealing with. Uh, I think I have never before encountered that whole metaphor of Pinocchio dying and going to the land of the dead, but there being this whole sort of thing of like, you get to go back, but you have to stay here for longer at each time. And so, like early on, the first couple, it's kind of like he almost doesn't get to stay as long as he wants to because he has questions. But then later, it starts being like, oh, but wait, what's happening back there? And I can't go back yet. I can't help my friends, or, you know, and I thought that was a really interesting element. And I don't know. I mean, I'm finding myself just going on and on about
Yeah, I mean, I
it.
guess I hadn't thought that much into it. I mean, I just really I enjoyed it. I thought,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it is much darker. His take on Pinocchio of, I mean, just the fact that he's like looks more like just like a rudimentary like wood carving,
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
you're used to the Disney version where
Yeah,
he's like,
cutified.
yeah, he's very
He looks more
uh
like a toy.
yeah, he looks like a toy, but he's very whatever they call the thing where you look very human.
Mm-hmm. The uncanny valley, is that what you're looking
No,
for?
like it's like a you give
Um,
human characteristics to something that doesn't necessarily have
Anthropomorphized.
anthropomorph. Yeah, he's very much more that
Mm-hmm.
in the Disney version.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
whereas this
again,
one, yeah,
yeah, in the
go ahead.
Disney version, they definitely treat his creation like Geppetto is a toy maker, and Pinocchio was a labor of love that he spent a lot of time and hard work and love into, right? As opposed to this version of Pinocchio, which that's in there, but it's also was done in kind of a hurried, desperate, you know, violent almost way, right?
Right.
Like his ears are asymmetrical because Geppetto was drunk, you know, and dealing with all of that, I thought that was interesting. One criticism that I've seen a couple of people make that I didn't necessarily find, but I want to see what you think about it, is they thought that this version of Jiminy Cricket, voiced by Ewan McGregor, um, didn't actually do enough actual helping of Pinocchio to merit him being rewarded at the end.
Huh.
And I don't know, I kind of felt strange about that because it's true that his efforts to guide Pinocchio are not ultimately terribly successful. But one of the themes of the movie is that our parental figures are not perfect. They're doing their
Right.
best, and sometimes they screw it up. You know, he gets himself squished and stays under a book for a while until Geppetto comes and finds him.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that, but I mean, he
Well,
helps him get out of the. I mean, whatever it's a whale. I don't think it was
yeah.
a whale
Well,
in here,
right.
but
Well, and but see, like at the end, the reward, the idea that he's getting his wish as a reward, but like his wish is to help Pinocchio and Geppetto, right? So, like in some respects, like that's the key moment there, not necessarily things that had come before, right? Like the idea that it's like some of that criticism felt like they were trying to make it really transactional. Like, sorry, this is good place rules. You didn't get enough good points. You didn't meet the threshold, so sorry, no wish. They have to stay dead. Like I don't know. I didn't get that criticism at all, but I didn't want to like dismiss it out of hand. But I felt like they were saying that because he was not very successful at getting Pinocchio to actually listen to him and do the right thing, they thought that that meant that he hadn't done a good job as Pinocchio's conscience.
yeah, I see what you're saying, but
And I
yeah,
guess I could see that because, like, it went hand in hand with the idea that this version of Pinocchio is kind of a brat. Which, I mean, yeah, he is. But that's like part of the twist on the themes that Guillermo del Toro is telling here. Parents aren't perfect, and the kids aren't either, right?
yep,
But that doesn't mean that you don't love them or that they're not worthy of love. But
yeah, no,
anyway,
that's a great point. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So,
um, I liked all of the stuff with the circus master and the monkey. I don't remember the monkey's name, but I liked that stuff. Like I think early on, I felt like why are we spending so much time with these characters? But then by the time they came around again, I liked that they were there. Um, and I was enjoying the movie all the way through, right up until the whole conclusion sequence where I was just devastated and sobbing through it. It just the ending really hit me hard in this movie.
where he like outlives everybody
Yeah,
part,
yeah,
or
basically,
yeah,
yeah, that whole bit. But just like not even just that happens, but just like the specific way that it all plays out, and
yeah,
you know, just tying in all of those themes to it, and just you know, but you remember, you know. Anyway, um, but yeah, I thought it was wonderful, and I'm kind of excited because the Blank Check podcast, which is one of my favorite other movie podcasts, I've mentioned it here before. Um, they do a March Madness bracket every year to
Hmm.
to choose one of the filmmakers that they're going to cover in the next year, and it's not a lock, but Guillermo del Toro is getting into the final four for it, so he
Nice.
might be one of the ones that they cover. And he's a controversial choice because although he has certainly made a lot of great movies that, like, I'm a big fan of. I don't think that there are some of his movies that I understand why they don't work for everybody, but I like a lot of his movies quite a bit. So I'm a fan, but I think some people think of him as um, not necessarily style over substance, but that he is very style heavy and his substance tends to be the same over and over. That's the critique I think I've heard of him, which I'm not sure I entirely agree, but he certainly has some of his favorite themes. You know, outsider struggling against the tyranny of mundanity and fascism. Yeah, that tends to come up a lot.
Yes.
But yeah, so in any case, anything else to say about Pinocchio?
No, sorry, I'm just distracted right now.
Oh, that's all right.
The neighbors have left their window open and their dog is yapping. And so my puppy is just, because he's alone down there,
Mm.
he's just howling at it.
Aw,
And I can't stop him when I'm up here. I got to get him. He's
that's all right.
being really bad.
Okay.
Blue,
While
come
I'm,
here.
for those on the stream, I'm leaning
Come
down
here.
to pet my own little dog here.
Blue, come here. Stop that. Get in here.
um, so in any case, I think if we're wrapping up,
Come here. You need to chill.
did you have anything else to say about Pinocchio, or shall we go ahead and talk about
No,
our
let's
next?
move on. Come
Yeah.
here.
Okay, so I think
Chill.
as we wrap up our 2023 Oscar movie marathon, we're going to return to the episode that we were actually planning to do months ago. That we kept, we ended up doing the crossover with Shameless Cash Grab before getting to it, and then it was time for the Oscars, and so we're now at very last, after a long delay, going to get back to our David Fincher episode. And so, if people don't recall, we had decided those many months ago that we were going to watch Fight Club, Panic Room, and Zodiac as selected films from David Fincher's filmography. And so that is what our next episode will be. So, are you excited to did you watch any of them when we originally planned it, or
I didn't. Um,
well, we changed gears relatively quickly after making that decision.
yeah, it was like
And
the
then
next, it
just
was less than a week, I think.
yeah, and then there was
Difference.
just lots of other things going on.
Yeah.
But I didn't either. So in any case, I still have all of them to watch, and I think it would have been long enough that I might have wanted to rewatch them again anyway. But in particular, I haven't seen Zodiac since I saw it in the theater, and I know a lot of people have kind of come around on that, thinking that it's maybe like a masterpiece. Um, and then Fight Club, as we talked about when we originally picked these movies, is one of those movies where it has kind of a legacy that is probably not what David Fincher intended it to be. And it's maybe going to be a good jumping off point to talk about like intended messages versus received messages in art, which can be quite complicated. Like on that very subject, I just recently rewatched Silence of the Lambs, which has a similar issue. Like, so that's it's a complicated issue. So we'll probably talk about that with Fight Club, but also perhaps revisit the things that made it powerful and made an impression on a lot of people. So, and then Panic Room is kind of one of those. We sort of picked it as kind of one of the like middle of the road. It's a thriller. It's kind of fun, but isn't necessarily anybody's favorite.
Yeah, but it does a lot of interesting things with
Mm-hmm.
a plot that could have been
It's
not
got Jodie
interesting.
Foster in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
All right, so we will be back then to talk about Fight Club, Panic Room, and Zodiac. But in the meantime, watch good movies, everyone.
Good movies.